Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Belly to Belly. And we're here talking with great friend Kajal Sanghrajka. How are you, Kajal?
I'm great. Good to be here, Bill.
Yeah, and of course, you're from Upsite, and you all work with companies on incentives and credits. This is going to be a great conversation because I get asked about this all the time. So, do you mind before we hop into kind of talking specifically about uh, credits and incentives? Do you want to share just a little bit about what Upsite does to help companies?
We like to think of Upside as your companion to expand and scale smartly, globally. And we've started with a focus on the US market, and we're really building an AI-powered operating system for global growth for both companies and for governments. So on the company side, we support with finding and discovering the right incentives to support your growth. And for governments, we help you to find and attract the right companies that are the best fit for your location.
That's fantastic. So, maybe if you could give us, and thinking about the US, because that's the majority of our audience are working on expanding in the US, what's the size of the market? How many incentives and credits are there? What's the value?
So you won't believe this figure, but it's literally like 90 billion, and 60% of that goes unused. And we thought when we saw this figure, it's just crazy, right? If you're a founder scaling, creating jobs, creating value, bringing knowledge and expertise to any US location, there are incentives for you to do that, and you shouldn't be leaving that on the table. And when we started sort of breaking down, why is this? Why is there the 60% unused? We talked to people and they said, one, they just had no idea they existed. And two, if they did, they sort of put this into the too difficult bucket, which means we don't know how to talk to state and local governments. We don't have the time and resources to engage. So our first goal at Upside was first to really break down all of those incentives. There's 2,500 programs across the US. We've consolidated all of that data and information in one place, so you can see that very easily through an interactive map. And then you can really personalize this. So depending on the nature of your expansion, from early stage to later stage companies, you can find the best fit incentives for your needs.
Fantastic. So, I guess I think there's a perception that most incentives are for kind of manufacturing and life science, but ultimately to fulfill the recruiting desires of the states, which are to create jobs and so on. Can you walk through are there different types of incentives geared to different types of companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you mentioned to manufacturing life sciences, which of course are eligible for really strong incentives because they're often R&D focused with large capital investments. But let's break this down. I mean, there's federal, state, and local incentives. Federal programs are sort of geared towards income and payroll taxes and offsetting those. When you get down to the state level across states, you see sort of two segments: states with high taxes that offer more incentives, and then states with lower taxes where there are less incentives. But when we break down state incentives, that's where it starts getting really interesting because there's a lot to play for and lots of different specialisms among states. So if you are, let's talk about stage and maturity. If you're early stage, there are what we call innovation support programs. So they offer you things like a landing pad where you can launch your business, they can open doors for you, create partnerships. And there's a couple of examples of that. So in New York, there's the Start NY program where you can operate tax-free near New York University. New Jersey just actually announced a international launch pad. So for international startup, you can launch and they provide lots of in-kind benefits to help you grow. So it's worth saying that even at the early stage, and we're definitely seeing folks in the UK, for example, expanding to the US earlier and earlier. And there's still programs that you're eligible for, and it's really wise to do the research. So even if you don't tap into it straight away, as you grow, it will become more and more important. So if we talk about later stage, that's where it starts getting really interesting, right? Because you're creating more jobs. And if we think about tech and life sciences, they are highly skilled jobs, often R&D jobs. You can achieve up to 40% off your payroll, which is incredible, right? So I think let's say Series A, Series B companies, especially when you start growing your headcount, it starts to become really important to do your due diligence on what's available. And at the state level, just to kind of give you examples of categories, there are R&D tax credits, workforce training programs, regional development credits, depending on sort of demographics you're looking at hiring, and then sustainability related credits, for reducing pollution, etc. So depending on your industry, different states will have different specialisms, and that's where that sort of consolidated data really makes a big difference. And it's not just about when you're in Europe expanding to the US. Once you're already in the US and you're growing, it's a conversation on where do you grow, where is best to put your next 100 to 200 staff, for example.
Right. No, that's wonderful. So if I were going to kind of think about it, because again, I hear this all the time, and sometimes it feels to me like companies are too focused on it. In other words, I'm a let's say a fintech company, and I'm worried about incentives. It seems like, if and the way I hear it, it's like in their top three questions or concerns. And it seems to me like, maybe I, get free space for a while or whatever. That might be once I'm down to a top 3 or 5 choices in terms of geography, that might help finalize my decision. Where if I were a life science company and I could get 40% off of my payroll, that might be a considerably different value discussion in terms of making the decision, finalizing a decision in terms of where to go. I guess, am I thinking about this correctly?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on its head. I mean, this is about strategic growth decisions, not just in the near term, but the medium and long term. And the location, we will always say that it's never just the incentive that dictates your decision, right? That nobody wants adverse selection there. But it is about thinking holistically and making that part of the equation. And increasingly, we see, especially with venture-backed companies, if you're Series A, Series B, there's an expectation that you're doing your optimization there and due diligence there on what you're being offered. And for areas like life sciences, where it is highly capital intensive, R&D and research focus, you're bringing a lot to those states. It's amazing to see what these states can do for you in terms of opening doors. This isn't just about money. This is about relationships. This is about creating buy-in, managing these stakeholders early on so that as you grow, there's more and more they can help you with. And, just to sort of give you an example, North Carolina has a biotechnology center. Nobody thinks of North Carolina. They think of California, New York, maybe Texas. That's fine. But, there's specialized centers of excellence in many different states. And if you happen to be in one of those sectors, it can really change the trajectory of your business. And the state is there willing to support you. And we just think there's not enough people shouting about some of those programs, and we should be championing them. So that's what we're doing at Upsite as well, is an education piece to really tell people about this. And especially in Europe, they don't always have teams on the ground. So we need to be sort of telling founders and CEOs and CFOs about what exists.
You anticipated my next question, because I was going to ask about sort of, are there intangible benefits of getting an incentive or tax credits, and it sounds like that really develops a much greater, potentially a greater relationship with whatever state or region you're going into, so that they have sort of a vested interest in your success and can often contribute in other ways, such as maybe introductions or facilities or various networks or whatnot, that can be also impactful for the business. Did I hear that correctly?
100%. And this is an often sort of neglected point, because incentives is not just money. This is about the state investing in you and believing in you, really. And there are a number of states, for example, which have matched funding. So independent of where your investors originate, if you bring in investment, the state will match it. And their lens is economic development. We want you to create jobs. We want you to bring your expertise. There's such a mutually beneficial win-win here, if you get that relationship right and the engagement from the start. And as I mentioned, as you grow, of course they can facilitate introductions. In the case of the co-investment funds, they're even more invested. So there's even potentially investors in their circles. So the intangible benefits are pretty huge. Obviously that we can't quantify those, but we've seen, companies who go to certain states and do that right and do that exercise, it really does pay off in the long run.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of logic in that, because they've invested in you just like an investor, and so they are all, you're top of mind. They're thinking about you as they're working with other companies, and the logic of making connections, because their goal is to help you employ more people, to help you expand in the region. So yeah, it totally makes sense. Kajal, this has been so fantastic. Do you mind if I include your contact details in the description below?
Yeah, absolutely. We're at upsite.ai, so relatively simple there. And you can actually, go on, you can book a demo with us. And we actually offer complimentary half-hour sessions for companies who are looking at discovering what incentives they may be eligible for. And we're happy to just offer our guidance for many, many years, supporting companies expanding to the US on what their consideration should be and what may be open to them. So we're really happy to help.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. It was great to spend time with you today, and really appreciate your wisdom.
Thanks again, Bill. Much appreciated.